G'day punters, welcome back to the Punters Academy. This is episode 10, John, so we're back from a hiatus. John went away late last year overseas to America, ate some good food and had some good experiences.
Yeah, nearly died and did it all. It was great. Yeah,
indeed.
Great.
And of course I've got my annual holidays that I take each year too, down and sit on the beach for a few weeks. So we're back in the swing of it, and we've got some questions. Our first couple of questions are hangover questions from late last year, which were posted in after the last episode, so we might just address those first. The first one is from James, who's an Axis client. He says, I've been watching the Punters Academy and you and John have put them up and find them very insightful. When is the best time to place your bet? I lean towards the last 5 minutes when all the information is at hand and which prices you can watch, etc. But I'm sure this is an area a lot of punters could do it with a pointer or two on. Still, an area I get wrong, obviously won't be right all the time. Anyway, cheers mate, hope you have a fill up this week. And that was a while ago.
Yeah, probably wasn't for me. Yeah,
probably wasn't for either.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen James, look, I think it depends on the horse from my point of view, what type of horse, what type of stable, whether or not the horse is first up, into a preparation, and it also depends on the confidence I have in my price. So if I'm very confident that I can have that horse potentially shorter than what I've rated it, then and I'm happy with the price, then I tend to bet. But I don't bet early. I'm not really one that takes prices after 9 o'clock. I tend to wait in play, like yourself. If it's a horse that's resuming for a spell or coming off a bit of a query or a fitness issue, I like to get insight from what Betfair's doing and what the market's doing late, so I tend to wait later before I back those types of horses. John, what do you think?
Similar, like the more I know about the horse, the more likely I am to bet early if I'm confident money's going to come for it for whatever reason. If it maps well, you've got it short, and it's over to your price, it's pretty hard to not bet early because these big teams tend to find those horses and they can shorten so rapidly. You know, it's whether it's all the bet you want to place on it or a percentage of it is up to you. But I tend to like the horses that, for a lack of are obvious on top of my reasoning for liking them, I usually will take a bit of the early price if I think it may trim up, which they usually do. If it's a horse like you're saying that where you've got limited information on it, or you're looking for a bit of a market guide to help you with its fitness levels, or whether it's on the job 100% that day, I'm sure they're all trying, but I'm meaning that it's ready to go that day. I'll be waiting for those horses because the market swings late in betting are just crazier than they've ever been for mine. Like things can get out from $5 to $15 in 2 or 3 minutes late in betting, and you might not have the bet you were going to have early on it, but you still may have something on it because it's such outrageous value. It's such a different marketplace in the last 18 months. It's not an easy one to get right all the time, but I think if you use some sort of plan, whereas you've got to have some confidence in your price, and if your confidence level is high in that price, then you've got to bet to it, whether it be early or late.
And if not, well then you need to wait. But
yes.
Look, I mean, from my point of view, the early markets are algorithmic driven. So you back a horse at, for example, I could make a horse at a provincial or a country meeting go from $5 to $3, with probably $500 in total in bets if I carefully place those bets with corporates, because one goes off, the others follow. It's self-perpetuating and it's exaggerated. So often you see those horses get back out in the betting. Yes. And they're not blowers, they're just getting back to their right.
So you've got to notice that too when you're sort of calculating whether you think a horse has had market support, what its actual realistic price is, and then once they're sort of, if you've got it marked 6 to 4 and it's 6 to 4 to 4s, it's a bit different than if it's $5 to 3 back out to 5. It tends to they tend to be overreacting to like I sent a horse out today for a place, which is not that normal for me, but it was $11 to $6 in 5 minutes simply because people had followed me in for the place. So it's just,
and of course if the place market goes off, then the win market,
that's all it is. It's just and that's it. So it's the algorithm's following probably very small win betting and some decent place bets, and that horse will no doubt jump back out, especially if it's a little bit soft in betting because it's first up actually. So
one thing we didn't talk about was Betfair and the premiums that you can see on prices sometimes versus the market. So if a horse is say I don't know, $5 into $4.20, there comes a point where the price on Betfair, if it starts to get to that towards the late end of the market in the last couple of minutes is a great concern. You know, when there's a premium, it might be
if there's a premium on,
it might be a 25% premium. But it gets to a certain point where it becomes
where it's someone who you feel that over time it's someone who knows more than you for whatever reason. If they're happy to lay a horse 25-30% over its price, absolutely. There's not many people of sane mind that are going to do that without some sort of extra knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, volume's got to support that as well.
Obviously. Yes, yeah.
We're not talking a few $100s.
No.
If there's decent,
if it's confident and it's just, and there's no price that they're happy to lay it at, it's usually pretty scary. Yeah,
it is. And there's not much you can do really in that.
No, but I think over time, if you sort of stay out of it, it's going to you're going to finish in front if you leave that horse alone rather than getting excited by the extra price that's there.
They can overdo it. I mean, sometimes they can overdo it on GM.
Yeah, they win. They all win. Yeah, they all win. You know, for whatever reason. But you'd think that those horses would be, you know, left in the draw most of the time. Would be you'd be in front over the long run.
Righto. Let's get on to the next one from Brody. Now, this is also a question from late last year. Hi, Paul. I often find myself in a situation where I can't split two horses and would like to back them both. I typically equal stake them or bet one, save one, depending on their prices, but I find myself losing in this situation more often than I'm winning. I understand your approach of betting to collect 4% of your bank is an effective way to ensure long-term profitability, but my question is, how do you adopt the bet to collect 4% of your bank approach if you like two or more horses? Brody, it's the same, no change. So if you've got two horses at say $4, and you're betting to collect 4%, and your bank say 10,000, you're backing to collect 400, you're having $100 on each essentially. It doesn't matter whether it's one horse, two horses, or five horses. You're still staking proportionally in accordance with the horse's price. Yeah,
exactly. It doesn't matter how many horses in the race. I'd agree with that. It's especially with that approach. It's not how I approach it, but it's that's how the only way you can do it.
I mean, there might be situations where you do only want to save on one because you've got a question mark over the price.
Yes.
Or the horse might be resuming, and you think, well, if this horse goes around, I don't want it to go around a loser, so I might save my stake. But if you're equally confident about the horse's chances, you must equally stake them in accordance with whatever strategy you're employing.
100%, can't improve on that.
Okay, so the next one is from Matt, who's an Axis client, and Matt's got a few questions here. We'll break it down. He basically goes on to say a couple of questions. Some might be appropriate for the show, some not. So pick and choose. Okay,
no X-rated
so
things. It's all right.
We won't put the X-rated stuff in. A number of your subscribers are obviously professional. What sort of banks did they put together prior to turning professional?
There's no answer to that. Surely, like everyone starts at a different level. I'm sure that most start without a bank and sort of turn it into a bank. That's the only way most people can get there. It's very hard unless you've got a day job.
Yeah, if you haven't got a day job, then you need to sort of have decent money behind you. I think probably a good guide would be to sit down and say to yourself, well, okay, what are my living expenses for 12 months?
Correct, yeah.
I'm just going to pick a number here.
50,000 or something like that. Yes, yeah, $1,000 a week.
That's about the best, about the minimum I can live on. Let's say, if that's the case, then you would want at least, I would say, 2 to 3 times that.
We'll say you're going to work on 5% on turnover or something like that, where it's a realistic sort of figure. So then you've got to be turning over.
You can turn your bank over probably, depending on how you bet, how often you bet, how many bets you have. But in my instance, I'm probably turning my bank over anywhere between 12 and 16 times a year.
There you go.
So 12 times 50,000.
So 25% of it a week or something is realistic at best, or something like that.
You probably need about 150,000 to start, I'd say. So that's 50,000 for your living expenses.
To win 1,000. That's right.
Yeah, 20,000 a week, or a bit more. You probably need a $50,000 living expenses put away.
Yes. And
maybe another 100. And that's probably going to get you there, providing you've got an providing you've got the talent.
Yeah, correct. And that's to be able to bet conservatively, not no exposure, no unrealistic exposure.
That's grind.
Yeah, correct.
It's just on the grind. Yeah, you might get lucky and you might get into a good.
A lot do operate with less than that. Like there's no doubt in the world, but you don't to put yourself under the sort of pressure that's realistic and you can maintain a level head. That's sort of figure that I think that's a realistic figure. What you're talking about, sort of. And if you do that, it's a good effort. Like if you only got 100 there and you make a 50 a year, it's a pretty good effort in any business. So
yeah, that's right, absolutely. How many professionals' income comes solely from betting? I'd imagine it's much easier to sleep if there's a small steady source of income coming in to pay the bills. Look, I don't know the stats on that. John, you run a service.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat to this, pretty much. Like I would probably did in and out of just betting. Other jobs along the way, sort of when they come up opportunistic wise, and then only recently sort of went into the tipping side of it and then picked up the jockeys as well. So, you know, apart from an extra workload that's involved, it definitely does help with your stability, because you know that no matter sort of what happens, there's still going to be income coming in. So I wouldn't, if you can overlayer it like I do, whereas the form I do helps me with the jockeys, helps me with the service, and helps me with betting, it's ideal, because you're not working 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week in a warehouse and trying to do 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week on the form. So if it can all overlayer, I think it's a great system and definitely helps someone like me.
Well, and people like yourself, I mean, there's also our good friends at Racing Rant, Mark and Glenn and so forth, Gord. I mean, they're all punters, and they obviously have an income stream from the service. I run
similar to that, right? Yeah. Well, yours is even similar, but you're helping others. It's kind of funny how you've.
Oh, mate, I'm just trying to cover the.
But you've designed a tool. That's right. You've designed a tool that's good for you, and then exactly. If you're making
time saving.
Yeah, time saving. But if you're making a side profit out of that, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? But obviously much more involved, bigger risk from your point of view, setting it up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of IT development cost. There's a lot of ongoing cost in terms of maintaining the data, accessing the data, getting the verified data, manually correcting errors. I mean, there's a huge
workload attached that you don't see yet.
A work-intensive load that happens behind the scenes. But the main reason for us starting the business in the first place was to get to a point where the expenses were covered by subscriptions, and
time was saved in other areas.
R&D, as it were, on the database, and betting was on the side.
The cream of it, yeah, that's right. So it's a similar setup. That's exactly it is. So if you can set up a business that sort of way, where it's all complementing each other, however it is, it's going to help you. If you're time splitting between different things, I think it's a little bit counterproductive, but it's not always. Not always a choice sort of thing. It definitely, for a stability of life situation, it's great to have a steady stream of income away from punting.
Sure. I mean, punting can be very up and down, as we know.
And it's a much different landscape. The reason why people like, I know Nathan Snow did it for a while, the betting landscape's much tougher to, for certain sort of punters to extract it. As say, if you're not like me, I'm a little bit more, when I find an opportunity, I want to maximise it. So it's harder to do that now for me. So if my swings are different.
Turnover is a big thing. I mean, it's been something that's been massively impacted for me. I'm only talking from my own experience right now, and that is that say 05, 06 compared to now, I'm probably turning over maybe 20%, 15 to 20% of what I was back then, and that's not been by choice.
That's the thing. That's the issue.
By the environment.
By the environment.
And I'm trying to correct that, and we're going to talk about that a bit later in another little discussion that we have. But certainly turnover has impacted, I think, punters.
The ability to turn over. Yeah, the ability to turn over is affecting the profitability. So it's sort of important for people to find different streams of income to back it up, and even whether it be through bloodstock, affiliates, people do it through that sort of thing. There's plenty of ways to make money out of the industry, other than just straight up punting.
Then he goes on to say, Matt says, same professionals obviously run subscription services. We just talked about that, to the subscribe or at least share services with professionals specialising in other areas to increase their turnover. So I suppose what he's asking is, John...
Do you share information?
Yeah, like, let's say, Billy Blogs has got a Brisbane service who's well regarded, and we say, well, we want to increase turnover, so we want to bet in Brisbane. We haven't got time to become specialists. So do we subscribe to Billy Blogs and increase our turnover, or do we just...
A lot of people do that. A lot of people do subscribe to a lot of services, vet them, sort of run their own results and run their own over, and then bet accordingly after a few months or whatever. There's quite a few that I've sort of in my own service that have come on board and say that this is what we do. Happy to, we're going to have a look for a couple of months regardless of whatever results people post. they just want to see and fit it into how, that's basically what they are. They're just turnover machines with no real opinion of their own. They're just running off other people, which is fine. That happens in, a lot of other industries. There's no doubt about that, but it's just a matter of finding consistent services and understanding sort of how they work. I wouldn't, it's interesting, like I've set up that chat room on mine, and basically you get people in there from different jurisdictions, different states, all sharing information all the time. So that's basically what it is, and I can only imagine that everyone in there's turnover's gone through the roof because they're sort of gaining information from everyone else. It's quite interesting to view, and I think that is the only way. There's no way you can cover it without a system like yours, where you can cover everything, knowing what's behind the scenes, all the states, basically with the press of a button, and obviously a lot more going on behind the scenes. It's very difficult to cover a lot of areas and increase your turnover without sharing information.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so as professionals, do you run a number of banks or staking plans for different areas or systems? Personally, Matt, I run one bank. I don't see any problem with running more than one bank, and in fact I've heard lots of people talk about it.
Interesting, like even Dominic Byrne,
talked about it. I suppose if you're going to run exotics as part of your model, or any type of bet that's more riskier, I suppose, from a point of a capital perspective, then it makes sense perhaps to segment or segregate a certain portion of your bank for that purpose, and treat it as a separate bank. But look, I think at the end of the day, if you win betting and you're a purist in that sense, then you have one bank and you bet to it. Yes.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. And I think when it came up with Dominic Byrne, that they were sort of saying they were you can overlay different character sort of check boxes basically. So if this is your one bet, and then if it checks this box, so you can double and triple up on the same bet, and that's how you kind of have a bigger bet than usual. I guess there's a lot of different ways to approach it.
Is that the way it was?
Maybe that's the way
I wouldn't be increasing my stake on a horse. Because of multiple selections or systems that have come up. So if you're running a couple of systems, so that might be profitable.
I thought that was how it kind of worked. That if it was sort of like for the want of a better, you end up having a super bet on a horse when it basically meets every characteristic known to man. I think you're right. I think Dominic's
does it increase the horse's probability? No.
Well, it depends. Theoretically it does, but it's not. It shouldn't be incorporated in your first price. Depends how you set things up. Depends how you do things. If you're price driven, no, it doesn't. It should all be in the one price. But I don't think. To me, at the end of the day, all banks roll back to one bank anyway. I don't really get. I understand why you do it, but you don't want to bet. Well, the only reason you'd separate banks from my is you don't want to bet as aggressively on some sorts of bet types as others.
Righto. With ratings to win, do you chips down on heavy tracks, or in turn potentially change from backer to layout on heavy tracks? That's a pretty open question. Look, obviously wet tracks can provide additional uncertainty. I think I'd prefer to have a very heavy track than perhaps a dead slow track.
A middle ground or a raining day or somewhere where the track's uncertain, changing in conditions. I'd rather at a heavy 10 than I'm with you, than a 5 with rain, or a 7 or an 8 where you don't really know whether it's a 5 or a 9. You know what I mean? Like, you'd rather at one extreme or the other.
I will say this, that on heavy tracks I become more map orientated.
On genuinely heavier tracks, absolutely, yeah.
So I do become, as I said, more map orientated and biased towards horses being in the right spot.
In the right spot with a bit of fitness behind them, absolutely.
Fair call. Nothing to add.
No, nothing to add. I definitely wouldn't say I would go from a backer to a layer, because it's the same to me. It's just you're looking for different things.
Righto, I think that's what we'll do for part 1 this week, and we'll be back shortly with part 2.